Lukin was saying, "Understand me, Yefim. I'm calling for your own good. We must try to save you." "I don't need saving," Yefim replied. "I need respect. I need a respectable hat." "The problem, Yefim, isn't the hat. It's the head that wears the hat. I want to help you. Come see me tomorrow and we'll discuss what to do next." "When tomorrow?" "Why don't we say at 1600 hours? The thought occurred to Yefim, and he jotted it down on his notepad, that if Lukin had not been an important official, he would have simply said at 4 o'clock, a telling detail. Vaska tiptoed quietly past the open door. He waved to signal Yefim not to bother. He'd let himself out. "All right," Yefim said into the receiver. "I'll be there." In Lukin's office, in addition to Lukin himself, Yefim found Party Committee Secretary Samarin, Secretariat members Viktor Shubin and Viktor Cherpekov, critics Bromberg and Solyony, Natalia Nish, and a man Yefim did not know whose blonde hair was parted on the side and neatly slicked down. Yefim did not immediately see Karetnikov. Karetnikov was standing by the window in a dark foreign suit with his Hero of Socialist Labor Star, Deputy's badge, and Laureate medal. His right arm lay in a black silk sling. His fingers, skillfully but somewhat ostentatiously bandaged, protruded like an awkward birch bough. Yefim was disconcerted to see so many people. From his telephone conversation with Lukin, he had expected a private tete-a-tete. Should he wait here for the people to leave or go sit in the corridor? Looking at no one, Yefim made for Lukin's desk to ask, but Lukin raised a hand and said hastily, as if fearing Yefim's teeth, "No, sit over there." He pointed to a chair at a small table off to one side. Yefim sat. No one spoke. Lukin was writing hurriedly. Karetnikov took a pack of Marlboros from his pocket with his left hand, shook them, and with his teeth extracted a cigarette. Then he produced a box of matches and, deftly gripping the box in the crook of his right arm, as if he had been disabled for years, struck a light. Solyony and Bromberg lit up too. The blond man took out a comb and combed his hair. The secretary entered, laid a paper in front of Lukin, and asked something in a whisper. Lukin replied loudly, "Tell him I can't possibly today. I have a personal case." Yefim looked at him in surprise. "What personal case?" "Yefim's?" But Lukin had said nothing over the phone about scheduling a formal hearing. Yefim looked around nervously and noticed that the people present were avoiding his eyes. Bromberg lowered his head. Natalia Nish turned away and blushed. Shubin was busy cleaning his nails. Cherpekov alone looked straight at Yefim, brazen and cheerful, for this was an event dear to his heart, when many come together to crush one. Cherpekov's colleagues were not so bloodthirsty. Under different circumstances, they would not have chosen to be here, but Natalia Nish, planning to take a trip abroad, needed a character reference, and those were impossible to obtain if one shirked one's duties in the collective. Solyony, who had been apprehended after many years of appropriating party dues and speculating in icons, nourished hopes of being rehabilitated, and Bromberg had come running simply out of fear. Years ago, he had been accused of cosmopolitanism, Zionism, and petite bourgeois nationalism. His writings had been pulled apart, misrepresented, distorted beyond recognition. His pernicious activity had been investigated by a commission under the leadership of none other than Cherpekov. Bromberg's attempts to vindicate himself had been taken as proofs of low cunning, hypocrisy, duplicity. He had suffered such fear that he was now willing, if only they left him in peace, to pull apart whomever they liked. The secretary left. For a while, Lukin stared at the paper she had put before him. Then he looked up at Yefim and said, "How are you, Comrade Rocklin?" Yesterday, Yefim had been Yefim. Today, he was Comrade Rocklin. Yefim shrugged, fearing a trap. "You shrug. You have a health problem?" "No," Yefim decided to be careful what he said. "How long since you last saw a psychiatrist?" the blond man asked unexpectedly. He got out his comb again. "And who are you?" Yefim asked. "That is not important," the blond man said. The door opened and someone dressed in gray stepped in soundlessly. He nodded as if to everyone, yet to no one in particular, then slipped along the wall and sat down behind Bromberg. No one got up. No one was alarmed. They all acted as though nothing had happened. Even so, there was a new tension in the room, the sense almost of an otherworldly presence. The moment the man in gray entered, Karetnikov reached over to a potted ficus tree and put out his cigarette. Solyony stubbed out his cigarette against the leg of a chair, and Bromberg tiptoed over to Lukin's desk and crushed his cigarette in a marble ashtray practically under the general's nose. The general looked at Bromberg in surprise, frowned, and pushed the ashtray away. Addressing everyone, he said softly, "Comrades, we are here to examine the statement of Vasily Stepanovich Karetnikov, who is present. I will now read it to you." Karetnikov left the window and quietly sat behind the man in gray. As Lukin, removing his glasses and squinting, read aloud, Yefim took a pen and pad from his attaché case and began to take notes. Koretnikov's statement was written in a stilted, bureaucratic manner with pretensions to style. A so-called man of letters, it said, one Rocklin, taking advantage of Koretnikov's trusting nature and the unflagging generosity which he, Koretnikov, always showed to writers of the younger generation, had entered his, Koretnikov's, apartment under the pretext of acquainting him with his, that is Rocklin's, new manuscript. Rocklin, however, did not produce said manuscript, but instead demanded that the abused victim, Koretnikov, use his influence to obtain for him, Rocklin, certain undeserved privileges. Upon receiving a firm refusal, the perpetrator switched from demands to threats and from threats to abusive actions, finally committing an entirely unprovoked assault upon the person of the abused, a most outrageous, humiliating assault which required said victim to seek the ministrations of a physician, not to mention loss of his capacity to perform his regular literary, administrative, and community duties. I appeal to my comrades and colleagues, Koretnikov's statement concluded, to examine Rocklin's behavior and to pass judgment on that behavior, and it is my hope it will be a judgment that will defend the honor and dignity of an active member of our united and high-minded writers' organization. All this was heard in funereal silence. Vasily Stepanovich, Lukin asked, have you anything to add to your statement? My finger, Koretnikov said, is swollen and infected, and I had to have a shot of antibiotic. In a case like this, you should play it safe and have a rabies shot too, Bromberg quipped. But no one laughed, because although the joke was directed at Yefim, it clearly hit Koretnikov as well, and the overall effect was unfortunate. Koretnikov continued, with this bandage I can't write, and tomorrow I have a district party conference and an appointment with the Afro-Asian Writers Delegation. Then the Secretariat, a conference of the Lenin Prize Committee, and a session of the Supreme Soviet. How can I sit in the Supreme Soviet looking like this? My wife told me to phone the Prosecutor General immediately. That's probably what I should have done. But frankly, I didn't want to wash our dirty linen in public. The reputation of our union is dear to my heart. The Secretariat, I hope, will be able to see that justice is done without recourse to the intervention of the legal authorities. Vasily Stepanovich cast a look of supplication at the back of the head of the man in gray before him, then resumed his seat. And we will, Lukin said. He too looked at the man in gray, but before proceeding with our investigation, I should add to Vasily Stepanovich's statement the facts that this scandalous incident has become the property of hostile Western propaganda. Some of you heard yesterday, I think, a certain anti-Soviet foreign radio station. Personally, I never listened to such broadcasts, Natalia Nish felt it necessary to remark. No decent person listens to that garbage, Solyoni added darkly. Lukin looked at Yefim. And you, Comrade Rocklin, did you not hear something of the sort? Excuse me? Yefim lifted his pen from the paper and looked at Lukin. Did you not hear, Lukin repeated in a rasping voice, something of the sort? Was that your question? Just a second, I'll write it down. Did you not hear something of the sort? He raised his eyes to Lukin. Of what sort? Flustered, Lukin looked at the man in gray, then back at Yefim. You are being asked, he began. Just a second, you are being asked, Yefim entered this painstakingly on his pad. Being asked whether indeed you did not also... Put that pad away, Lukin said, losing his temper. We didn't invite you here to practice dictation. Didn't invite you here to practice dictation, Yefim repeated as he wrote. Comrades, this is hooliganism, Bromberg shouted. Confiscate that notepad, or make him put it away. No, Cherpakov said ironically, let him keep it, let him write. The Pentagon, the CIA, and the Voice of America need an exact account. Yefim's hand began to tremble, but he continued to move the pen across the paper. He could not keep up, though, because everyone now talked at once. Nish accused him of disrespect to the group. Shubin said that Yefim had been to Poland and probably participated in the criminal activities of Solidarity. Yefim, writing furiously, missed the reference to Solidarity. Then Solyoni stood up. Comrades, he said, our agenda says we are here to censure Rocklin's act of hooliganism, but what he has done is more than an act of hooliganism. Consider. Vasily Stepanovich Koretnikov is a foremost writer. His impassioned, ardent books have instilled in millions of Soviet citizens love of the fatherland. Rocklin bit the hand that created these works. Why? Because he wasn't given a hat? Nonsense, Bromberg sputtered, especially since I am not in charge of any hats, Koretnikov said with a pitying smile. It's perfectly clear, Solyoni went on, that Rocklin acted not on his own behalf, but as an agent of enemies of our literature, enemies of our system. Yes, Cherpakov agreed. This isn't hooliganism. It's terrorism. Political terrorism. People were shot for such things in our country in the good old days. At this, Yefim stopped writing. He put the pad on the empty chair beside him and looked first at Cherpakov, then at Lukin, then at Karetnikov. The man in gray had disappeared. In his place, the blond man sat and combed his hair. Yefim had prepared himself for unpleasantness, but not for accusations like these. Suddenly he was frightened. He started to quake, to babble uncontrollably. His comrades had misunderstood him, he said. He was no agent of enemy powers, but had acted on his own. And he admitted that what he had done was outrageous, but he pleaded temporary insanity. Because having been a member of the Writers' Union for 18 years and written 11 books, mind you, about decent Soviet people of fearless professions, why do you tell us all this? Lukin growled. He's covering his tracks, Cherpakov laughed. Zigging and zagging, Zionist tactics. Silence, Yefim shouted, and stamped his foot. And why should I be silent, Cherpakov said, stepping forward. I didn't come here to be silent. Silence, Yefim shouted again. His whole body stiffened. He put his hands out before him, and with another silence, he rushed at Cherpakov. And now the most extraordinary thing happened. Cherpakov turned pale, shrieked, "He's going to bite me," and dove under Lukin's desk. Lukin was dumbfounded. Viktor Petrovich, get hold of yourself," he shouted, and kicked at Cherpakov. But Yefim too dove under the desk. The hunter's instinct had taken command of him, and he really was set on biting Cherpakov. But as he dove, something happened. A sweet taste filled his mouth. Then there was a flash of light, like arc welding, a second, a third, until the flashes merged into one majestic radiance and Yefim's body became weightless. Transformed into a white swan, he came out from under the desk and rose into the air. The committee members receded into the distance, craning their necks and staring at Yefim with open mouths. Yefim was taken to the intensive care unit at Botkin Hospital. The diagnosis, a stroke with loss of speech and partial paralysis of the left arm. The situation, Kukusha was told by a young physician with a red smoke-stained mustache who reeked of tobacco, is grave. And after a moment's thought, he added, extremely. What can I do for him? Kukusha asked, wringing her hands. You? He smiled. You cannot upset him. Yes, I understand. What he needs is complete rest and positive thoughts. Rest, yes, the doctor said, lighting a cheap cigarette. As for thoughts, he'd be better off without thoughts right now, positive or negative. Kukusha, however, did not agree with the doctor. She had boundless faith in the curative power of positive thoughts. When she and Tishka were allowed in to see the patient, she hardly recognized him. Yefim was all tangled in tubes and wires, and his head was so bandaged he looked like a man from outer space. The wife and son, both wearing threadbare hospital gowns over their clothes, sat by the patient's bed. He stared indifferently at the ceiling. The doctor says it's not serious, Kukusha told Yefim. Everything will be all right. The main thing is for you not to worry. At home, all is well. Incidentally, young guard called yesterday and said your manuscript has gone to the printer. And a letter arrived from the manager of Lin Film. Your script has been given to the director. And what else? Oh, yes. I got the clothes from the laundry. Tishka's doing well, too, aren't you, Tishka? Yes, Tishka said. Tell your father about your paper, she said. It's nothing special, Tishka said. They're publishing it in the proceedings. He's being modest, Kukusha said. Academician Trunov said Tishka's paper was worth more than some thick doctoral dissertations. He said that, didn't he, Tishka? Tishka nodded. Yes. So everything's fine with us. You don't need to worry. Lie still and get well. As soon as you can eat, I'll bring you something good. Would you like bouillon? Or maybe something sweet? Or better still, something on the tart side? Should I make you some cranberry punch? Yes or no? Can't you talk a little to let me know what you want? Yefim frowned, mumbled something. What? Kukusha asked, bending down to him. Ha. What? Kukusha looked at Tishka. Tishka shrugged. What did you say? Come on, make an effort. Try to say it more clearly. Ha, Yefim said. Oh, hat! Kukusha guessed and rejoiced. You still want your hat, so you do have desires. Wonderful. You'll get well, you'll recover, and you'll have your hat. No. I won't go and buy one. I'll make them bring it to you. Lukin will bring it personally, I promise. An elderly nurse entered the room with a collection of syringes. That's all now, she said softly. Visiting hours are over. Yefim and I have our little procedures to do. I heard that Kukusha went straight from the hospital to Lucan, who received her with a great reluctance. She scolded the general and demanded that the Secretariat issue a fur hat to her poor husband as restitution. He's critically ill, she said. He needs positive thoughts. The general put on a face of stone, indicating that no displays of misguided humanism could be expected of him. I'm sorry, but I can do nothing. We tried to help him, but he persisted in his defiance and wouldn't confess his guilt. Guilt? What guilt? Kukusha exclaimed. So he bet Kretnikov because of a hat, but now he's dying. And surely you don't think my husband deserves the death penalty? Lucan did not reply to this. He stared past Kukusha, and from his face she could tell that he did not care whether or not Yefim died. Listen, Peter Nikolaevich. Kukusha abandoned her chair and went right up to Lucan's desk. What kind of man are you? Why are you so cruel? You too, in your time, suffered. It seemed to Kukusha that these words got through to him. Yes, he said, and assumed a dignified air. I suffered, but I suffered for principles, not for a hat. And when I suffered, his lower lip started trembling. I never once doubted our high ideals. Look, my daughter, he pulled out his wallet. His daughter, Kukusha mimicked, flying into a fury. A little girl and a little beau, but killing a man, that's easy for you, you son of a bitch. She reached across the desk and seized him by the lapels. If you don't personally bring my husband a hat, so help me all. The general struggled to free himself. Zinaida Ivanovna, what are you doing? How dare you? Kukusha came to her senses. She spat at Lucan and rushed from the office in tears. In Insurrection Square, she grabbed a taxi, collapsed into the back seat, and cried all the way home. She had no idea what to do. She couldn't buy a hat with her own money and say that the Writers' Union had issued it to her. Yefim would know. The taxi drove into the courtyard and pulled up behind a black Volga. Kukusha paid and started toward the entrance, but the door of the Volga opened and a tall man in a dark coat and narrow-brimmed hat blocked her way. Zinaida Ivanovna, I am Colonel Koleshnishchenko. Kukusha took a step back. A KGB colonel? The man smiled. No, infantry. Aide to Marshal Pobratimov. He has arrived and is waiting for you at the Hotel Moscow. This was not the best time for a rendezvous, but Kukusha went into action. All right, I'll be down in a few minutes. Very good, ma'am. She dashed upstairs, threw off her clothes, and was back in no time, giving off the mingled scent of soap and perfume. The marshal occupied a deluxe 3-room suite. In the vestibule, on a 4-pronged polished rack, hung 2 greatcoats and 2 tall sheepskin hats. The owners of the hats were sitting in a sumptuous living room at an oval table, covered with hors d'oeuvres enough for 12. They were drinking French cognac in tumblers. 1 bottle had already been emptied and another begun. The room was dense with smoke. Wavy blue-gray layers of smoke floated beneath and around a many-tiered crystal chandelier. Zina, my love! One of the revelers, a large man with a shaven head who looked like Yul Brynner, rose to greet Kukusha. Pobratimov wore a green uniform shirt with marshal's epaulettes but no necktie. His parade jacket, heavy with medals, hung on the back of a chair near the Becker piano. Unabashed by the presence of his drinking companion in Koleshnishchenko, the marshal embraced Kukusha and kissed her full on the lips. Phew, she couldn't help pulling back. You must have brandy breath, Comrade Marshal, the companion said, approaching Kukusha. This was Pobratimov's former aide, Ivan Fedosievich, now a major general. Good day, Zina, my dear. He raised Kukusha's hand to his mouth and kissed it wetly. Yes, the fumes must be pretty strong. I didn't even think, the marshal said, embarrassed. He was drunk but in complete possession of himself. Now here's a splash of cognac for you, my love. Let's be fragrant together. He poured a half tumbler for Kukusha, for Ivan Fedoseyevich, and for himself. Then he looked at Kolesnichenko, who was still standing at the door. Comrade Marshal, I still have to visit my sister, Kolesnichenko said. Permission to disappear. Granted, the marshal said. Kolesnichenko disappeared. The marshal raised his glass. Well, Zina, my love, to our reunion. Why are you so down in the mouth? Kukusha drained the whole half tumbler in one gulp and turned to Pobratimov. I've got trouble, Marshal. My husband, her lip quivered, just had a stroke. She burst into a howl. Another half tumbler was poured for her and she was asked to tell the whole story. The men listened attentively. You mean he brought himself to this on account of a hat? The marshal asked in surprise. It happens, Ivan Fedosievich remarked. I remember we had a lieutenant colonel who was expecting a hat too, a colonel's papaka. When they didn't give him one, he put a bullet through his head. A fool, Pobratimov said. Obviously a fool, Ivan Fedosievich agreed, especially since there'd been a mistake. They'd given him the promotion, but forgotten to include him on the list, so he received his papaka posthumously, you might say. It was put on the lid of his coffin. A fool anyway, the marshal said, shaking his head. Better a live lieutenant colonel than a dead colonel. After the third bottle was opened, Kukusha's story about Lukin's heartlessness was heard. And who is Lukin? The marshal asked sternly. That KGB general, maybe? Ivan Fedosievich wondered. You know him? Yes, Comrade Marshal. If he's the one, I know him very well indeed. He came to me once, asked me to exempt his grandson from the draft. The boy's a photographer, athlete, mountain climber, and Komsomol leader. I see, the marshal said. You exempted him? Yes, Comrade Marshal, I did, but that error can be rectified. The marshal said to Kukusha, nodding in Ivan Fedosievich's direction. Shrewd fellow. What an aide I lost. Excellent, Ivan. Send the little bastard a draft notice, would you? And when Grandpa comes running, tell him we'll ship the kid to Afghanistan, and if he doesn't personally take the hat to the hospital, tell him that Marshal Probertimov will eat him for breakfast. Yes, Comrade Marshal. Yes, sir, Ivan Fedosievich said happily. I won't use quite those words, but I'll get the point across. What kind of hat do you want, dear? He asked playfully, turning to Kukusha. Fin, feather, or fawn? As a result of the above conversation, a letter was delivered by messenger and signed for by a young cameraman and graduate student named Petya. Following the instructions in this letter, Petya presented himself at the military registration and enlistment office and was received personally, to his surprise, by none other than the military commissar of the city of Moscow, Major General Danilov. The general was extremely cordial. He came out from behind his desk, shook Petya's hand, seated him on the couch, and sat down right beside him. So you're a cameraman, the general asked, turning the light of his gold smile up on Petya. A splendid profession. Not as safe, though, as some people think. I remember we had a cameraman at the front, a man of exceptional courage. Sometimes to get a good close-up, he would practically lie down under an enemy tank or expose himself to the machine guns. A remarkable man, the general sighed. He perished, unfortunately. Continuing with his questions, the general learned that the young cameraman possessed many other skills. Petya was a mountain climber, knew karate, had been active in community work, and was on the executive board of the Moscow Komsomol. Why, you seem destined for us, the general clasped his hands together in a thoroughly unmilitary manner. We want to record the difficult work of our soldiers fighting abroad, so we need a good cameraman. Someone to show the struggle in the mountains. Your experience as a mountain climber will be invaluable. And finally, we need people who have been hardened ideologically, who are devoted to our principles and ready to lay down their lives for them. You're sending me to Afghanistan? Petya asked in a weak voice. For the first time, the smile faded from the general's face. Young man, he said quietly, in the army one does not ask the obvious. All things in life are connected. If Kukusha hadn't seen Marshal Probertimov and Ivan Fedosievich, Lukin's grandson wouldn't have been summoned to the military commissariat. If the grandson hadn't been summoned, the grandfather would have had no reason to go there too, and if Lukin hadn't gone there, he would have had no reason then to phone Andrei Andreevich Shupov. The result of all these encounters and phone calls was the rush order and manufacture by the co-op of the USSR Lit Fund of one special order reindeer fawn hat, size 7.5. When it came my turn to visit Yefim, he had already received his hat. Peter Nikolaevich Lukin had personally delivered it to him in his room, had sat beside him and told him stories about his military past. Through this noble act, Peter Nikolaevich consolidated his authority among the writers. Despite everything, though he was KGB, he wasn't a bad sort, unlike some. Yes, if ordered to shoot, he would shoot, but on his own initiative, Peter Nikolaevich wouldn't hurt a fly. And if there was the chance to do some good, he'd do it. Yefim lay in a small room which he shared with a convalescing old man who left when I appeared. Yefim's head was bandaged so much that only his eyes, mouth, and nose were left uncovered. A plastic tube had been inserted in his nose and fastened with tape. Another tube from a bottle suspended above him was taped to his left wrist. His right arm, I saw, was not paralyzed. With it, he was stroking the reindeer fawn hat, which lay on his chest. Not knowing how to entertain him, I began by talking about the chess tournament, which had been won by his favorite grandmaster, Spassky. Seeing him take no interest in the tournament, I switched to a story about the manager of our apartment house, who was renting out his office to prostitutes for a percentage of their take. Yefim listened politely, but in his eyes I saw reproach. I became ill at ease, feeling that with that look he was asking, why tell me such trivial nonsense when here I am about to leave this world for another? I was ashamed, but somehow couldn't bring myself to speak seriously. I told him an utterly stupid anecdote about Margaret Thatcher and Neil Kinnock, inventing it right on the spot. Finally, seeing that my exertions were producing no response in the patient other than the desire to be delivered from them, I decided it was time to leave. Well, old man, I said in an insufferably false tone, enough of this. Next time we'll meet at home. We'll smoke a cigarette and have a game of chess. I touched his shoulder and made for the door. I was turning the knob when behind me I heard a shrill, agonized sound. Looking back in alarm, I saw Yefim gesturing, beckoning with the finger of his good right hand. He moaned and poked at the hat with his finger. You'd like me to put it on the night table? I asked. He swung his hand in the negative. As I stared, uncomprehending, he poked at the hat again and showed me two limply spread fingers. You mean that you have two hats now? His reply this time was not a moan but an angry howl, and he flapped his hand in frustration at my obtuseness. Obviously, he needed to convey some important thought. It was a cry wrenched from the heart. Two half-bent fingers, like two commas, waved before my eyes. I said, not trusting my own guess. You mean you won? He growled in a satisfied way and dropped his hand on the hat. As I left, I glanced back once more. Eyes closed, hat clasped to his chest. Yefim lay quiet and calm. He was smiling. That very night he died. Yefim was given a modest funeral. He did not lie in state at the Central Literary Club, nor did a band play for him. It was already the end of March. A wan sun was shining, and slow rivulets trickled from under the dark snow that banked against the walls of the morgue. The gates of the morgue were wide open. The funeral bus was late. Among the people gathered around the coffin, I saw Baranov, Fishkin, Milnikov. I don't remember who else. At the head of the coffin stood Kukusha in a black hat with a black veil that fell over her eyes, and Tishka, who held in the hand tucked behind his back, I noticed, not the reindeer fawn hat, but the wolf fur hat his father had given him. Yefim's face, no longer bandaged, seemed appeased. I placed my little bouquet at the feet of the deceased, embraced Kukusha, and shook Tishka's hand. As I greeted the others, I saw Vaska Tryoshkin too. He had arrived after me, apparently, and his behavior was stranger than usual. Hunched and crooked, he was twitching and looking around as though he planned to steal something or else had stolen it already. When he approached the coffin, he bent over the deceased and kissed his brow, then gazed long and searchingly at those stiffened features as if trying to read something in them. Someone touched my elbow. It was Kukusha. Don't you think he's acting peculiar? She whispered, indicating Vaska with her eyes. He's always acting peculiar, I said. Vaska hurriedly made the sign of the cross over Yefim, not with the usual 3 fingers, but with his whole hand. Then he thrust his hand into the coffin, somewhere under the deceased's neck, and immediately pulled it out again. Did you see that? Kukusha whispered. He put something in there. We'll find out right now. I went up to the coffin and looked at Vaska, who was watching me nervously. As he watched, I reached in, felt under Yefim's neck, and pulled out a sheet of paper folded several times. Stop, Vaska came running over. Don't touch it, it's not yours. What is it? I hid the paper behind my back. None of your business, Vaska growled. Give it to me, it's mine. You have no right, Kukusha said, coming over. Putting your hand in other people's coffins without permission, not to mention inserting unauthorized objects. She took the paper from me and unfolded it. I peered over her shoulder and saw a word written in large slanting letters with an exclamation point at the end. Operation! Vaska twitched with embarrassment. What does this mean? Kukusha said, frowning. It's a riddle that he gave me, and I solved it, but he died. So I thought, well, why not put it in anyway? Maybe he'll read it on the other side. Maybe he'll give me a sign. Let me have it, he pleaded. Let me put it back in. It won't do any harm. Outside the gate, we heard the rumbling of the bus, which had just arrived. It will be burned anyway, Kukusha sighed, returning the paper to Vaska. She started toward the exit. While the bus turned around and backed up, a black Volga drove into the courtyard and stopped. Peter Nikolaevich Lukin climbed out of the Volga, removing a crushed blue beret from his head. He approached, looked at the deceased, and conferred in whispers with Kukusha. Then he stood at the head of the coffin and gave a speech in which he enumerated all Yefim's merits, not forgetting his wartime service, his 18 years in the Writers' Union, and his 11 published books. Peter Nikolaevich also said that the deceased had been a fearless, decent man. That, being good, he had seen only the good in life. I thought that Peter Nikolaevich would then say something about people who saw only the bad in life because they themselves were bad. And I thought that as he said this, he would look in my direction, but he didn't. He concluded his speech with the promise that the memory of Yefim Semyonovich Rokhlin would remain in our hearts forever. We rode to the crematorium in 2 buses. I happened to be in the one that carried the coffin. On the Sadovaya Circle, we made almost all the green lights and moved along quickly. Yefim lay in front of me with his elevated head, sharpened nose, closed eyes, and an expression as though he were pondering some serious and important idea. In the traffic, the bus alternately sped up and slowed down. Patches of sunlight streamed in. They skimmed over his peaceful face like a reflection of his thoughts. Vaska Tryoshkin, sitting across from me, stared intensely at that face. Next to him, Kostya Baranov and Tishka carried on an inaudible conversation. Fishkin gazed apathetically out the window, and Milnikov's whisper poured into my ear as he recited for me, neglecting no detail, an article about him that had been published in the New York Review of Books.